Welcome back to CrushTalk, the podcast where your passions become conversations. Today we're diving deep into a fascinating topic.
Oh, yeah.
The quest for the ultimate tearjerker movie. We're talking about those films that can crack even the toughest nuts.
Right.
And get the waterworks flowing, you know?
Yeah, it's not just about finding a sad movie, though.
Right.
Our listener has a unique challenge, and their source material is a Reddit thread where they're trying to find a film that will make their dad cry.
Yeah, and apparently this dad didn't even cry during Titanic.
Yeah.
Like, come on, what does it take?
Wow.
But here's where it gets interesting. The listener mentioned their dad did cry during a specific Futurama episode.
Oh, the episode with Fry's dog Seymour? It's known for being a heartbreaker.
Oh, yeah.
But it brings up an interesting question.
Okay.
What kind of emotional chord does animation strike that live action sometimes misses?
Right. It's like maybe this dad isn't moved by tragic love stories or epic battles, but something about animation makes him connect on a different level.
I think it highlights how individual experiences shape our emotional responses. What makes one person weep might leave another completely unfazed.
So how do we apply that to this tearjerker challenge? I mean, where do we even start?
Well, the Reddit thread has some great recommendations, but I think the key is to look beyond just plot summaries and try to analyze why certain films or scenes resonate so deeply with people.
Okay, let's unpack this. The top recommendation in the thread was My Life with Michael Keaton.
Okay.
A lot of users highlighted the scene where he's terminally ill and getting a shave from his father in hospice.
That scene is powerful because it taps into something universal, the complex relationship between a father and son. Even if you haven't gone through that exact situation, there's a raw emotion there that's hard to ignore.
It's like that scene captures a lifetime of unspoken things between them, you know? But then you have a movie like Saving Private Ryan, which another commenter mentioned. They said it was incredibly moving, especially the opening scene, but they were also a military veteran.
That's a great example of how shared experiences can amplify emotional responses. The commenter talked about the silence in the theater during that scene, a silence that spoke volumes about the weight of what they were witnessing.
It's like for someone who's been through war, those scenes aren't just entertainment. They're triggering deeply personal memories and emotions.
Exactly. It raises an interesting point for our listener. What are their dad's life experiences? What kind of stories might resonate with him on that deeper level?
Right. It's like we need to understand his emotional language to find the film that will really speak to him. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
Yep.
It's like trying to find the right key for a very specific lock.
Yeah.
But you need to understand the mechanism, the emotional landscape of the individual to unlock those tears.
Okay, so we're not just looking for any tearjerker. We're looking for something that's tailor-made for this dad. And the Reddit thread has a ton of recommendations, which we can group into a few categories.
Yeah.
First up, we have the classic father-son stories like Big Fish and Field of Dreams.
These films often explore the complexities of those relationships, the love, the conflict, and ultimately the longing for connection. Big Fish, for example, isn't just a whimsical story. It's about a son trying to understand his father's larger-than-life personality.
And those larger-than-life stories, those tall tales, they're not just entertainment, are they? They represent something deeper about how the father sees the world, how he wants to be seen.
Exactly. And the son, played by Billy Crudup, struggles with that.
Right.
He wants the truth, the facts, but ultimately he comes to appreciate the beauty of those stories, the emotional truth they hold.
It's like the film is saying sometimes the way we connect with our parents is by accepting their version of reality, even if it's different from our own.
And Field of Dreams, while fantastical, taps into a similar vein. The idea of a son getting a second chance to play catch with his deceased father to say the things left unsaid. It's incredibly potent.
Yeah, that line, "Hey, Dad, want to have a catch," gets me every time. But what about movies that go beyond family dynamics?
Okay.
The thread also had a lot of recommendations for devastating documentaries like Dear Zachary.
Documentaries have this raw power because you know you're watching real people, real emotions. And Dear Zachary is particularly gut-wrenching because it deals with the murder of a young father and his own father's quest for justice.
I read some of the comments about that one, and people were saying it messed them up for weeks. One person even said their grandfather wanted to throw the murderer in a shredder. That's intense.
It speaks to the primal emotions that this film evokes.
Right.
It's not just sadness. It's anger, grief, injustice, all rolled into one. And what's interesting is it seems to connect with people even if they haven't experienced a similar tragedy.
Maybe it's because it taps into our deepest fears, the idea of losing someone we love in such a senseless way. It makes us confront our own mortality, our own vulnerabilities.
And it makes us question the world, doesn't it? Why do bad things happen to good people? It's a question that doesn't have an easy answer, but the film forces us to grapple with it. Speaking of grappling with tough questions, the thread also had a lot of films that directly explore grief and loss, like Manchester by the Sea and What Dreams May Come.
Okay, so Manchester by the Sea is known for being a quiet, almost understated portrayal of grief. Did you find it effective? I've heard people say it's one of the most realistic depictions of loss they've ever seen.
It's definitely not a film that goes for cheap emotional manipulation. Yeah. It's subtle, nuanced, and focuses on the internal struggle of the main character, played by Casey Affleck, as he tries to cope with a devastating tragedy.
And What Dreams May, on the other hand, takes a more fantastical approach, dealing with the afterlife and the idea of reuniting with loved ones after death.
It's interesting how both films, despite their different styles, ultimately explore the same themes: how we process grief, how we make sense of loss, and whether there's any possibility of healing. And that's something that's universally relatable, regardless of your personal beliefs.
Right, whether you believe in heaven or not, the idea of losing someone you love is a universal fear. And these films offer different perspectives on how we might cope with that loss.
They remind us that grief is a complex, multifaceted experience. And there's no right or wrong way to deal with it. But what's important is to allow ourselves to feel those emotions, to process them, and ultimately to find a way to move forward.
So we've got films about family documentaries, about real-life tragedies, and movies that dive deep into grief and loss. But wait, there's more.
Uh-oh.
The Reddit thread also had some interesting picks that don't necessarily fit into these neat categories. Like, remember that Futurama episode we talked about Jurassic Park? It's actually mentioned quite a few times in the thread.
It's a testament to the power of animation to evoke deep emotions.
Right.
That episode with Fry's dog Seymour waiting for him for years. It's simple, yet incredibly effective.
And people were saying it's not just the story, it's the way it's told. The music, the animation, the voice acting, all of it comes together to create this perfect storm of heartbreak.
And it proves that sometimes the most unexpected stories can hit us the hardest. We might go into a sci-fi comedy expecting laughs, but then we get blindsided by this gut-wrenching tale of loyalty and loss.
It's like those moments catch us off guard, and that's when the tears really flow. Speaking of unexpected tearjerkers, I noticed a few people in the thread mentioned Up.
Oh, yeah.
It's Pixar, so you think it's for kids. But that opening sequence, man, that's brutal.
That montage showing Carl and Ellie's entire relationship from their youthful dreams to their shared joys and sorrows, it's masterful storytelling. They pack a lifetime of emotion into just a few minutes.
And it's all done without dialogue, which is even more impressive. It's just music and visuals, but it's enough to make you sob uncontrollably.
It shows that sometimes the simplest stories told with sincerity and heart can have the most profound impact. It's about tapping into those universal experiences that connect us all, regardless of age or background.
So are we any closer to figuring out what might make this dad cry? It seems like we've got a lot of options, but finding the right one is still a bit of a mystery.
I think we're getting there. We've explored different types of tearjerkers, analyzed what makes them effective, and started to consider the listener's dad's personal experiences.
Right. And maybe that's the key takeaway from all of this.
Yeah.
There's no one-size-fits-all tearjerker. It's about finding a film that speaks to the individual, to their specific emotional language.
And sometimes the most effective way to find that film is to think about the stories that resonate with us personally, the ones that made us cry.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And on that note, I'm curious, what's a movie that's made you cry? We've been talking about all these films, and I'm starting to feel like I need a good cry myself. Maybe we can get some inspiration from each other's experiences.
Like we're trying to solve a puzzle.
Yeah.
What movie will unlock this guy's tears?
Right. And speaking of unlocking tears,
okay,
we've got a ton more recommendations from the Reddit thread to get through.
Oh, yeah. Bring them on.
Okay. So we talked about father-son stories earlier.
Right. Big Fish Field of Dreams.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the thread also mentioned a few others in that category, like About Time.
Oh, that's a good one. It's got a great mix of humor and heart.
Right. And it deals with time travel, which is always a fun twist.
Exactly. Plus, it's got Rachel McAdams, who's always a win.
Always. Although one commenter thought the recommendation was for In Time with Justin Timberlake.
Oh, no! Completely different movie.
Right. Not exactly a tearjerker.
Not even close.
Okay, so moving on from heartwarming father-son tales. The thread also had a bunch of suggestions for documentaries.
Oh, yeah. Documentaries can be some of the most powerful tearjerkers out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because you're watching real people, real stories,
Yeah.
real emotions.
Exactly. And one that came up a lot was Dear Zachary.
Oh, man, that one is tough to watch.
It's about a young father who is murdered
Right.
in his own father's fight for justice for his grandson.
It's one of those films that just stays with you long after you've seen it. I was reading the comments on the thread, and one person said their grandfather wanted to throw the murderer in a shredder after watching it.
Wow, that's intense.
I know, right? It just shows you how deeply this film affects people.
It really does. It taps into some primal emotions, anger, grief, a sense of injustice.
Yeah, and it makes you question everything you know about the world.
Absolutely. Speaking of questioning everything, the thread also had a lot of recommendations for movies that explore grief and loss in a more direct way.
Okay, like Manchester by the Sea.
Yeah, Manchester by the Sea. What Dreams May Come. The Green Mile.
Oh, The Green Mile for sure.
Yeah.
That one always gets me.
It's a classic for a reason. It's got this incredible blend of drama, fantasy, and spirituality.
And Tom Hanks, come on. You can't go wrong with Tom Hanks.
True that.
He just brings his incredible humanity to his roles.
Absolutely. But what about Hachi? A Dog's Tale. Do you see that one?
Oh, Hachi, the dog movie.
Yeah.
The one that makes everyone cry.
Yeah.
I did see it.
Yeah.
And yes, I cried. It's impossible not to. That dog's loyalty is just heartbreaking.
I know. I think any movie with a dog as the main character is automatically a tearjerker.
Pretty much. Especially if something bad happens to the dog.
Don't even get me started.
Okay.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've got father-son stories, we've got documentaries, we've got movies about grief and loss, and of course we've got our dog movies.
It's a pretty comprehensive list. It is. But the question remains, what will make this dad cry? So we've explored a lot of emotional territory in our quest to find the ultimate tearjerker for our listener's dad.
We have, but the Reddit thread has a few more gems for us to unearth.
Oh, good. Bring it on. I'm ready for more emotional roller coasters.
Well, how about we switch gears a bit and to delve into the world of historical dramas?
Okay. I'm intrigued. What do they have in store for us?
Some folks are recommending Schindler's List. Talk about a powerful film.
Schindler's List is definitely heavy stuff. I mean, the Holocaust is such a horrific part of history. Do you think a film like that can be emotionally effective even for someone who hasn't personally experienced that kind of tragedy?
I think so. It confronts us with the darkest aspects of humanity.
Right.
But it also highlights the incredible resilience of the human spirit.
Right.
And that scene where Schindler breaks down, realizing he could have saved more lives.
Oh, man. That scene gets me every time. It's like you see the weight of all those lives lost crushing him. It's not just about the historical event. It's about the emotional toll on an individual who's trying to do the right thing in impossible circumstances.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It makes you think about the choices people make in times of crisis, the sacrifices they make, and the impact those choices have on others. It's a powerful reminder of our shared humanity and the importance of standing up for what's right.
Speaking of standing up for what's right, one commenter mentioned The Iron Giant.
Oh, yeah.
It's animation, but it deals with some pretty serious themes. War fear and the idea of choosing your own destiny.
The Iron Giant is interesting because it takes these big, complex ideas and presents them in a way that's accessible to both kids and adults. And that scene where the giant says, "Superman," before sacrificing himself.
Oh man, that line gets me choked up every time. It's so simple, but it packs such an emotional punch. It's about selflessness, about choosing to be a hero even when the world tells you you're a monster.
It's a powerful message, and I think it resonates with people because it speaks to that innate desire we all have to be good, to make a difference in the world, even if it means making the ultimate sacrifice.
Okay, we've talked about history, we've talked about heroism. Now let's get into some serious emotional territory. The films that really dive deep into the complexities of grief and loss. The thread mentioned Grave of the Fireflies, which is known for being incredibly devastating.
Grave of the Fireflies is a tough watch. It's a Japanese animated film set during World War II, and it follows two orphan siblings struggling to survive.
Right.
It doesn't shy away from the brutal realities of war and the devastating impact it has on innocent lives.
Some commenters said it's one of those movies you only watch once because it's just so emotionally draining.
Yeah.
But they also said it's a masterpiece, a film that stays with you long after you've seen it.
It's a film that forces us to confront the human cost of war, the loss of innocence, and the fragility of life. And it does so through the eyes of children, which makes it even more impactful.
It's like seeing the world through their perspective makes the tragedy even more profound. And it reminds us that even in the darkest of times, there's still hope, still love, still a desire to survive.
And speaking of surviving, another film that came up quite a bit is Life is Beautiful. It's another World War II film, but it takes a different approach, focusing on a father's attempt to shield his son from the horrors of a concentration camp.
It's one of those films that manages to be both heartbreaking and heartwarming at the same time. It's about the power of imagination, the importance of family, and the enduring strength of the human spirit.
It's a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable adversity, we can choose to find joy, to create beauty, to protect those we love. And that's a powerful message, one that can resonate with anyone, regardless of their personal experiences.
So after all this discussion, all these different perspectives on what makes a film tear-jerking, I think we're starting to get a clearer picture of what might work for our listeners, Dad.
We've explored a wide range of emotions, from the gut-wrenching sadness of Dear Zachary, to the quiet heartbreak of Manchester by the Sea, to the inspiring resilience of Life is Beautiful. And along the way, we've learned that what makes a film truly tear-jerking is its ability to connect with us on a deeply personal level, to tap into our own experiences, our fears, our hopes, our dreams.
And sometimes it's about finding that unexpected connection. A film that surprises us with its emotional depth. A story that reminds us of what it means to be human.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's the beauty of CrushTalk. We take these passions, these seemingly niche interests, and we turn them into conversations that explore the bigger picture, the things that connect us all.
So to our listener who's on a mission to make their dad cry, we say this: keep exploring, keep searching, keep an open mind. You never know what film might unlock those tears and create a shared moment of emotional connection.
And to everyone listening, we encourage you to share your own tearjerker stories. What movies have made you cry and why? Let's keep this conversation going and discover the power of film together. Thanks for joining us on CrushTalk, the podcast where your passions become conversations.